A major setback for Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine. Ukrainian forces have just made huge gains in their blitz of the country's south and northeast, just after Russia illegally annexed 4 regions in that area. Ukrainian officials say their troops have pushed deeper into Russian-controlled territory after recapturing the eastern city of Lyman over the weekend. It's a strategic rail hub and a gateway to the Donbas region. The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says his military also liberated settlements in southern Kherson region. Ukrainian troops making their presence known. Officials say this video shows a soldier raising Ukraine's blue and yellow flag in a village near the Russian border. For analysis, let's turn to the former FBI Special Agent Clint Watts, now a distinguished fellow at the Foreign Policy Research Institute and an NBC News national security analyst. Clint, how significant these particular victories for Ukraine?
Sheb, it just totally undermines Vladimir Putin's entire plan, which was to annex these regions and really say that they're Russia. There's just no way to say that when the Ukrainians are already in control of large chunks of terrain. The other part, which is we've watched over the last 6 months, is the Russian military has ground through this in just very small increments. The Ukrainians taking this back in hundreds of kilometers a stretch. And just today in Kherson down there in the south, they're executing a pincer movement, really enveloping another set of Russian military forces. So when you look at the manpower that they're trying to call up in Russia, struggling to do that, and the manpower they're losing on the battlefield in Ukraine, it's hard to imagine how Russia could continue to fight or do an offensive operation at this point.
Well, Clint, you know, the retired Lieutenant General Mark Hertling commanded the 1st Armored Division during the Iraq surge and later the U.S. Army in Europe. He's now arguing that Putin is sending new recruits to get slaughtered in Ukraine because they're so poorly trained. In a recent op-ed for the Washington Post, he wrote in part, having watched the Russian army during the first 7 months of its campaign in Ukraine, I cannot say I'm surprised by any of their setbacks. The Russians, he says, performed as their training would have suggested, poorly. The casualty counts reflect this. It is no wonder so many young Russians are fleeing the country. Do you agree with him?
Absolutely. The recruits, they're just pulling them straight off the streets there in Russia. There's already signs that some of them just mobilized a week ago are showing up on the battlefield on the front lines, being captured, maybe even killed. That's not a plan for success. It won't even hold the lines inside Ukraine. The other big thing is we're a month out from a very cold winter that will set in Ukraine. Those soldiers are barely getting to the front lines. How would the Russian military, in complete disarray, be able to resupply, refit, and actually launch any sort of like defensive maneuvers around their positions when they have no training? So it literally is just taking men, putting them at the front lines, and just trying to slow down the Ukrainian advance so that they can consolidate and reorganize their remaining units in the rear. That is not a plan for success. And that's why I think we need to look at some of those bigger responses, those asymmetric ones, cyber and nuclear and chemical. Those are the 3 I think we need to look out for here in the coming weeks. If Putin's back is totally against the wall, what would he do to stay in power and keep control inside Ukraine?
A lot of talk about nuclear, you know, that would be just unimaginable. And the U.S. has been ambiguous, clearly ambiguous about how it would respond.
That's right, Shep. I think the last arrow that Vladimir Putin has at this point is the nuclear arrow. He can kind of throw that in people's face in negotiations. He can talk about using it or even do demonstrations, moving equipment around. And I think that just really speaks to what we've known for the last few months. And I've talked to you on the show about is you can't use disinformation forever to hide tens of thousands of casualties. The war has come home in Russia. Men are being pulled off the street. You see it in every border town around Russia right now, men just fleeing in droves. This is going to have a devastating effect inside Russia over the next month.
Clint Watts, thanks very much.